Today's featured multi-award-winning author is Richard Battle, discussing his newly released novel, AmeriCANS, Who Made America, with guest interviewer Burke Allen of Allen Media Strategies. Thank you both for joining us today, and Burke, take it away.
Hey, thank you for joining us for a very special simulcast edition of our Big Time Talker podcast, presented alongside Zoom into Books with our friends from Headline Books. I'm Burke Allen, live in our offices here in Washington, D.C., where a big storm blew through last night, so the Wi-Fi is a little squirrely today. Hopefully we'll be in good shape. Hailstorm with hail the size of golf balls falling all around us. But we won't let the storm slow us down, because today my friend Richard Battle is our guest. He has a brand new book, and I believe this is the 11th book. It's called Made in America by AmeriCANS. Was that right? AmeriCANS Who Made America. I've got it right in front of me. Almost said it wrong. Is this the 11th book in your writing history? I see the whole bookcase behind you there.
Well, Burke, thank you for having us. Kathy, thank you for the introduction. Yes, that's book 11. But the one difference is it's not a novel, it's a nonfiction book, which continues our nonfiction efforts. It does match up with the Made in America book that we completed a couple of years ago, and there is a connection to those two.
And this book, you target young readers to expose them to the founders of America.
Well, yes, and let me back up the genesis of this. 2 years ago, we put out the book Made in America by AmeriCANS, not AmeriCANS, and it was a book of leadership, motivation, inspiration, trying to get people to be better citizens, to contribute to their communities. And I wrote some historical examples into that book, and one of the things we talked about was trying to come up with an American Hall of Fame. And I use American for the American-do spirit, because I think that's what made this country prosper over the last 200 years. And one of the people that interviewed me asked, well, are you going to build a Hall of Fame for these Americans? And I found out in New York City, they have a Great Americans Hall of Fame. It was opened in 1900. I never knew about it. I think most people don't know about it. I doubt many people go to it. And I thought inspirationally one day, well, if we can't go to the Hall of Fame in New York, why not bring the Hall of Fame to the people where they are? And so I was inspired to write this series, which this is the first of 4 books, AmeriCANS Who Made America. This is the 18th century birth of the Republic. And I profile 40 people with the American-do spirit, with 50 illustrations and 245 quotations. But I've written it in a profile or a scouting report type style, so that younger readers can read and enjoy it, yet adults will be able to read it and get something out of it also.
Richard Battle is our guest today, and I should mention that our Big Time Talker podcast is sponsored by SpeakerMatch.com, the world's largest online virtual speakers bureau. We have brand new podcasts that drop every Tuesday. We talk to fascinating people from all over the globe. Richard's brand new book is available from our friends at Headline Books. And if you're watching or listening to our podcast, and you go to Richard Battle's website, richardbattle.com, and enter the promo code BATTLE, 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 at checkout, you'll receive 20% off Richard's brand new book, AmeriCANS Who Made America. I've got a signed copy right here in the office. And I think it's interesting that you profiled great Americans that we know of, but also some everyday Americans that we may not have heard of. So let's start with the famous AmeriCANS, and who would be number 1 on your list?
Well, and let me back up and say every book ordered at richardbattle.com is signed, so people can have one just like you.
Hey, wait a minute. I thought I was special.
And if they'll email me, richard@richardbattle.com, I'm happy to inscribe them for gifts. We get a lot of requests for that. And so of the 40, we cannot leave out, to me, the most important person for America in the 18th century, and that's George Washington. He's the GOAT. That's the reason, and I love the cover that Kathy and Headline Books did for us of Washington crossing the Delaware, because I think that was the pivotal moment in American history right there, because the revolution was going poorly. It was a week before New Year's of 1777. Half of the Army's enlistments were going to be up. They were at, Valley Forge. They didn't have supplies. They'd been losing every fight they had. And yet Washington had the perseverance to carry the revolution on his back and to come up with the attack on Trenton the day after Christmas and crossing the Delaware Christmas night in snow and icy river to go turn the entire attitude of the American people and army around. So to me, that was one of the things he did, but obviously he set so many precedents as president of the United States. When he could have been president for life or king, he willingly gave up power. And we have someone talking about giving up power today, but it's a totally different thing than what Washington did at that particular time.
I think it's easy for people to look at the George Washingtons and a century later the Abe Lincolns and sort of mythologize these great American heroes. But you did a deep dive into this when you wrote this book and also your previous book. And you really focused in on leadership. So what made, in your studies, George Washington a great leader?
Well, I think one of the things was he didn't have the ambition that we see in a lot of leaders today. They run over people to try to get recognition and power in offices. Washington was always recruited and served. And when you don't have that ambition, you have something that comes with it, which is a humility, because you recognize that you're there to serve the people. They're not there to serve you. And to me, that is just missing in so many places today in leadership, in businesses, as well as public life. And I think that humility, not having that ambition, are two good things when you are a servant leader, which is the popular term today.
The book we're talking about is AmeriCANS, with an emphasis on cans, AmeriCANS, Who Made America. It's the first in a new series of books that Richard Battle, our guest today, has written. And this is really focuses in on the birth of the Republic. So what are the next books are you gonna do them century by century? How are you gonna break it all down?
Well, I think that's a great question. So the inspirational vision I had was to have 4 centuries, but I did the 18th century first. The next one to be released would be the 19th century, which we're working on currently. And hopefully we can complete a 20th and then go back and pick up a pre-18th century volume as well, because of the history of our country. And to me, that's what I'm trying to share, is the history of people, not only so we can celebrate and appreciate what they did for us, but they can inspire us to pursue and capture our dreams and to return the favor to future generations.
Richard Battle's book, AmeriCANS, Who Made America, available at richardbattle.com, headlinebooks.com, wherever books are sold. If you go to richardbattle.com and use the promo code BATTLE at checkout, you receive 20% off, and you can always email him and you'll get a signed and autographed copy as well. So as I look through this book, I'm fascinated. I'm a history, aficionado. My son would say I'm a history nut. I'm fascinated by the people that came before us. And yet in today's world, Richard, if you talk to lots of young people, they're not interested in history. And I'm curious as to why you think that is and what can be done to overcome this lack of interest in those who came before us.
Well, I think in the last couple of generations, our culture promotes today and the future, and it doesn't recognize or appreciate the people that came before us, who sacrificed to give us what we have. The privileges we have are only because they came before us. The lessons they learned, that they share with us that we can learn from to avoid the same mistakes they made or the same challenges they had. And so I want to highlight people, some known and some unknown, because there are many, many more than we can ever think who helped us be where we're at now. And I believe on the other side of that, we have a responsibility to do things today to help those generations in the future to repay that favor, as we said before.
And one of the great things I'll say about Richard's books is they're fun to read. It's enjoyable. You learn stuff, but it's like getting medicine that tastes good, right? So I guarantee you're going to learn, but you're also going to enjoy hearing these stories. Hey, you just mentioned folks that oh, I'm getting beeped here. You mentioned folks that are in the book that are famous. What about folks that maybe we haven't heard of before?
Well, and this is one thing I specifically did, and it didn't take long to find a diverse group of people, known and unknown, men, women, different races, different age brackets, who contributed, I believe, to help us. And one of the ones that I think is just so important is Mary Catherine Goddard. And she was raised in the Baltimore area, and she ended up being the postmaster in Baltimore, the first one, and ran a print shop. And she printed in January of 1777 the first copy of the Declaration of Independence with the signer's signature. Historically, she would sign her printed documents that she printed for customers, printed by M.K. Goddard, and she didn't reveal that she was a woman. But when she printed that declaration, she printed her full name, printed by Mary Catherine Goddard. Now, remember, the signers of the Declaration, when they signed that document, they were committing treason against Britain and basically received a death sentence upon their capture because of that. So Mary Catherine Goddard, when she put her name on that Declaration of Independence, even though she wasn't an official signer, she joined them. And the amount of courage it took for her to do that, to me, is amazing, because she didn't have to. She could have stayed behind that wall of anonymity, but she chose to put her name out there.
There's a Goddard Space Flight Center here in Metro Washington, D.C., and I have a feeling lots of people have no idea where the Goddard came from. Um, when you were rounding up the usual suspects and then you found other people like this, were there surprises? For example, did you know who Mary Catherine Goddard was before you started this book?
No, I didn't. And there were surprises. And so as I was going through and researching, and I've got 59 sources in here, I found different people, but I was looking for people who had that can-do spirit. They came from a variety of backgrounds. Some came from wealthy families and were well educated. Some came from poor families and didn't receive any education at all. But yet they all went out and did something positive, not only for their own benefit, but ended up benefiting us as well.
Our guest is Richard Battle. The brand new book is AmeriCANS, Who Made America, and it's great for middle school kids. If you've got a middle schooler in your life, maybe a son or daughter, grandson, granddaughter, I think it's great for that age group. And this is a spinoff of Richard's adult book, Made in America by AmeriCANS, not AmeriCANS. Now, if you want the brand new book, it's available at Richard's website, richardbattle.com. And remember, if you use the promo code BATTLE, you'll receive 20% off. And thanks for being with us, viewing and listening to our Big Time Talker podcast and Zoom into Books. You highlighted a lady that we haven't heard about, but many of us have heard of Betsy Ross, who's somebody that you highlight in the book. Did you learn anything about Betsy Ross that you didn't already know?
Well, I think the interesting thing was she was a seamstress and sewed a lot of flags and did other things. And it really wasn't identified until her grandson, long after her passing, that she was the one who sewed the first Stars and Stripes flag to her credit. And she had a lot of her family members involved as well, because she wasn't there to promote herself. She was there to serve the revolution and the leaders of that movement. And whereas today, a lot of people would spend more time promoting themselves than doing the work, she was all about getting the work done and taking care of the job at hand, and never really promoted herself.
I love that. I also love that in a time and place where, we talk about the contributions of many different people to make America great. You talk about men, women, and even Native Americans in this book who, many times got the short end of the stick, frankly, in American history, but you spotlighted a great Native American.
Well, Chief Pontiac, which, yes, there was a real person named Pontiac, not just an automobile. And he was up in the Midwest, Michigan type area, and brought the tribes together between the French and Indian War and the Revolution. And so he was a great leader for the Native American tribes back in that period. And I think that was so important to highlight as well, because again, it was that can-do spirit. Where he was with the opportunity that he had, he made a huge impact on people. And that's what part of what I'm trying to illustrate is not everyone had to be born from rich people with big educations to do this. People where they were, opportunities showed up, and they had that can-do spirit to do the things they did and contribute to our well-being.
Much like today, there's a lot more that we all have in common, no matter where we come from, than that which drives us apart. Hey, I want to ask you
That's
about
true.
this, the famous Spirit of '76 painting that we've all seen. It was in my elementary school, Stallings Elementary, back in West Virginia. I still remember that painting on the principal's wall. Let's talk about the Spirit of '76 painting, what you learned when you wrote this new book.
Well, and that's one of the illustrations that we have in there, and that picture was drawn to inspire people about the revolutionary effort. And to me, what's so important about that, as well as some of the other illustrations, and I highlight two artists among the 40 people, because as you know, not only were there not iPhones back in those days, there were not cameras. So all the illustrations were uh, paintings or drawings.
Right.
And those two artists were very famous Americans, Trumbull and Wilson Peale. And so they drew George Washington and other people. People would commission them to draw portraits. They communicated via that art. That was their contributions to what was going on. So instead of turning on the television for the news, they would draw portraits of people or draw other events to inspire and inform people of what was going on.
Richard Battle is the multi-award-winning author and media analyst who put together AmeriCANS, Who Made America. 18th Century Birth of the Republic is the focus of this book, and it's available at richardbattle.com. There's a discount if you use the promo code BATTLE, 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 when you go to checkout. You get 20% off, and you can also get the book personally signed by Richard. Just drop him a note at richard@richardbattle.com and let him know how you'd like it to be inscribed. The Revolutionary War, which we've all studied a little bit in school, and we may have seen movies about, could have gone and likely should have gone completely in the other direction. When you were researching this book, you found out that it came pretty close to going the other way. Why didn't it? What is it that led to the birth of the Republic?
Well, there's so many things that happen. Uh, all the fights early on, we lost, and until they crossed the Delaware and attacked Trenton, that was one of the early victories as well. That was one of the victories that helped bring the French in to help us, which was a turning point as well. But I think the main thing is I go back to George Washington himself, his perseverance and persistence. It never let him down. No one ever saw him down or with a negative attitude. He was always positive, always leading from the front, influencing people. And that brought up one of the people that I highlighted that I'd never heard of, and most people haven't either, who was Billy Lee. and he was a young African American, and he served George Washington as his valet or assistant at the time. And I visualize him being the recipient of George Washington's talking because he couldn't talk to anybody else. And I visualize him encouraging George Washington to go on, to keep going, to lead, be positive, do all those things. And if that's all he ever did, he was one of the greatest Americans who ever lived, because inspiring George Washington to be the GOAT, if you will, made the difference in the revolution. And here he was behind the scenes inspiring that leadership.
And again, I'm going to heap a little praise on you for this book. Not only do you spotlight folks like George Washington, but there are women, there are people of color, Native Americans, who all, combined efforts to help make the United States what it is today. That started 250 years ago.
Well, and that's what's important, because I believe everyone who's in this country that works and just doing your job, whatever it is, every day, every one of us contribute to a better future for the country. And that's what's so critical. But a lot of times it's easy to think, oh gosh, I got to go to work today, and it's day in, day out, week in, week out. And we don't really think about what we're contributing to others by what we do. But yet we all do that. And when we go back and look back in the past, it's easy to recognize it. And then if we recognize it, it's easy to recognize we can impact the future.
It would be terrific if pop culture would spotlight some of these folks that you have found in the book, like Mary Catherine Goddard or Chief Pontiac or Billy Lee. The Billy Lee's story that you wrote in this book, that to me just screams for a movie or a limited series on television. And look, I know that you don't have all the answers, but I'm curious if you have any thoughts as to why some of these stories sort of got washed out in the sands of time. I'm glad you brought them back in this book, but why don't more people know who Chief Pontiac is, or Billy Lee?
Well, one of the sad things, and I think back in the 30s and 40s and up through the 50s, there were a lot more biographies and a lot more positive affirmations of people who contributed to the country's success. And I think in the last couple of generations, especially, it's gone much more negatively, where if you're going to look at a George Washington, people focus on the negative. And if you look at other people, they focus on the negative. And the thing that bothers me is so many of the people who are critical, they can be critical. That's their free speech and their opinion. But a lot of them have never done anything positive themselves to contribute. And to me, I would rather focus on people's positives and accept the negatives than I would to totally disregard or cancel them because they might have done one thing that we don't accept today.
Our guest, Richard Battle, is a Next Generation Indie Book Award finalist, as well as a Mom's Choice Award Gold recipient. And this book, Moms, you should be aware, is terrific, especially if you've got kids that are interested in history, or maybe you're interested in getting them interested in history. The book is AmeriCANS, Who Made America. And it's all about the birth of the nation. You said something earlier that I think is interesting, and I'd love to talk about it with you for just a moment. And that is, in today's world, we all have instant access to information. If you want to know anything, you've got this device in your hand, you can Google it, you can find out immediately what's happening. And of course, that also opens the floodgates to lots of misinformation and disinformation that we have to sift through. During the American Revolution, things would happen, and there would be this enormous lag time before the rest of the world found out. So I wonder if in your research, as you learn about some of the more famous Americans like George Washington and Betsy Ross, did they do anything to manage their public perception at all? And if not, how did people find out? How did they learn what was happening during those revolutionary times?
Well, I think they were so busy trying to avoid being hung and win the Revolutionary War, they weren't focused on the PR part as much as we might today. But there were newspapers. There were people that wrote pamphlets. Thomas Paine's one of the most famous ones, and I highlight him as well. So there was a communication, but it was all communicated in paper format and by horses or wagons or carriages going back and forth between communities. So there were definitely lag times on what was happening at that time, but people were informed, and I think they were probably better informed than some of the people today on more principle type things than we may be, because we're so distracted by pop culture and all the fads and things of this nature. I think that the topics that they thought about were much more serious because they didn't have the leisure time, or they didn't have the money. Once the revolution was declared, I mean, it was you win or else type thing for the ones involved in it.
Our guest, Richard Battle, is the author of AmeriCANS, Who Made America. It's all about the 18th century and the birth of the United States of America. It's a great read, especially if you've got middle schoolers in your family. This would make a great gift for them as they get back to school. And with the promo code BATTLE, you can receive 20% off the book at richardbattle.com.
High school, college, anybody studying American history, or anybody who wants to feel better about being an American, anybody who wants to be inspired to go chase their dreams. I believe that smart people learn from their experience. Brilliant people learn from the experience of others. And here's the opportunity to learn from 40 people who impacted us. And then we can take that knowledge and go out and achieve greater things than without that knowledge.
That's our guest, Richard Battle. Richard, thank you so much for joining us on the Big Time Talker podcast and Zoom into Books. Best of luck with the new book. And congratulations on being a Mom's Choice Award Gold recipient and also a Next Generation Indie Book Award finalist. Well done, sir.
Well, we appreciate it. We thank you and Headline Books for this opportunity to publish the book, as well as to be here with you on Zoom into Books today.
Read about those great Americans and AmeriCANS, Who Made America, by award-winning author Richard Battle. For the folks at Headline Books and Allen Media Strategies here in Washington, D.C., I'm Burke Allen. Thank you so much for being here. Now go out and make it a great day. Bye, everybody.